Welcome to the OC, bitches.
Welcome to the OC, bitches.
Welcome to the OC, bitches. Okay, so I am so excited about this episode. We're actually not doing an episode, guys. There's something that people love just as much, if not more, than the show itself, and that's the music. So there's so much to cover, and I know we will only be scratching the surface of the music in this iconic show. And let's just get right to it then. How's about that? Okay. Our guest today is one of the most prolific music supervisors of television and film today. After founding Chop Shop Music Supervision in 1998, this three-time Grammy nominee went on to help create some of the most iconic soundtracks and music moments in history on shows like The OC, Gossip Girl, Mad Men, Chuck, Rescue Me, Marvel's Runaways, Grey's Anatomy, Supernatural, Riverdale, Dynasty, Bridgerton, for which she was nominated for an Emmy, and films such as The Twilight Saga, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Perks of Being a Wallflower, Coda, and more. Whew. She was also the chairperson of Music Cares. Welcome, Alexandra Patsavas.
So happy to be here. It's hard to hear all those titles, actually.
Really?
Well, it's quite the accomplishment. I mean, it's pretty, incredible. We've been so excited to get into the music of the show and to talk to you. We've been waiting a long time, and it's just so incredible everything that you've done. I mean, reading this list, I was even like, oh my God, like I didn't realize you did Bridgerton, and like the music in that was phenomenal. I mean, I had the soundtrack because it was just so cool, all those classic spins on those popular songs. And
Thank you. It is always fun to imagine a world. And I think that if we're going to talk about I know what we're here to talk about, but we'll talk about the craft of music supervision. It's really, how are we defining that musical world? And every world's different. And the OC certainly was.
But it speaks to the evolution of this job title that you have, that's not just defined by one thing. You don't just pick songs and stick it on a TV show.
My job has evolved over I started supervising in 95. So a long, interesting journey, from where I started to all the projects that I've worked on.
Did you study music or as a teen? How did that happen?
Such a good question, because I think the answer is always surprising. I was a musical kid. I sang in my school plays. I played in bands, but I was never going to be a professional. I was an enthusiast. But what I really was a music kid. And I was from Chicago and was a huge John Hughes fan, which I'm sure I'll bring up later, because I feel like there's some very Hughesian moments in the OC. And when I went to college, I started booking bands, landed in Los Angeles in the early 90s, and at first worked at a talent agency, then at BMI, which is a Broadcast Music Inc., where composers and songwriters are looked after as far as royalties. But finally, I started to work for Roger Corman, and I worked for a really generous music supervisor who really taught me the ropes on what this gig is and how you could do it. And of course, Corman's a legend. All kinds of B movies, and I worked on the reimaginings of those 70s movies in the 90s. And I think probably the sum of the 50 projects I contributed to equaled the music budget of one episode of television. So it really was quite an interesting journey as far as how to do that job and how to not do it with a ton of budget.
Isn't Corman famous for stretching that dollar, stretching that budget as the best way possible, right?
It was Roger Corman's School of Film, we used to call it.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so definitely. At some point, I started, after Corman, I started my own company, and I started Chop Shop in 98 out of my Los Feliz apartment, and eventually moved into a building across where Amoeba used to be until about a year ago. But before Amoeba was built there, my first television show was Roswell. They are now remaking Roswell, of course. And soon after, I was lucky enough to work on The Mountain with Stephanie Savage. And I worked on a project called Bookies with Norman Buckley, who I know you've talked to. And that sort of all eventually led me to the OC.
So cool. I think, maybe for people who are listening and they don't really know what a music supervisor is exactly, I'm sure they have an idea because you're responsible for the music, but maybe if you could talk about that a little bit and what it entails.
It's really about, gosh, it's a big question,
sorry.
Rachel. It's a big question, but I'm going to try to answer it. To me, music supervision, as I've already said, is really about defining the sound. More than anything, music supervision is a team sport. You don't do it by yourself. It's really, I always view it as an extension, in this case, of Josh Schwartz and Stephanie, an extension of how they are thinking about the show. And, my counterparts in editorial, the cinematographer, all the creatives, the costumer, we're all sort of make up that cross-functional team, that team of folks that are trying to carry out the creative aims of the creator. So my job might entail any song that's sung on camera, even if a character hums a song. It might entail the theme song, of course, bands on camera. Not only selecting songs for the show, but understanding how they fit into the budget. And lastly, doing a lot of clearance work, which is the decidedly unsexy part of this job, but essential. Making sure that all the creative stuff actually works and we can legally get it. Finally, it might entail doing soundtracks, companion pieces, maybe helping with marketing. So sort of music soup to nuts.
We were talking about how prolific you've become, but at that time, do you feel like what you did, especially with shows like The OC, was that the music was always a character? It was established that it would be a character. That's not true for every show. Like Law and Order doesn't necessarily have music, right? They might have the bong bong, but they don't necessarily have the teen angst. The certain songs that are specific to Marissa and Ryan, and certain songs that are specific to Seth. Do you feel like you had a part in changing this industry, and with your choices and your taste, becoming tastemakers, so to speak?
It's a great question. I think television was ready for that change, and I was really lucky that I was there at that time. But more than anything, I think Josh Schwartz wanted, he made music a character. And I was able to very naturally, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but in the second season, there was a venue on the OC called the Bait Shop. My background had been booking. And so I definitely understood how to book a band. But of course, the characters in the show, it to me, it was so natural. The poster on the wall, it never felt forced to me. It felt very natural that the music that we eventually chose, and it became, very identified with indie rock. That it was just natural to the show. It never felt forced to me. I never felt like, gosh, I'm trying to jam in something in a place that there shouldn't be music, or the characters would naturally turn it on. And I remember, working on getting posters for the Bait Shop with the art department. So everything was thought about. Like, we thought about it.
And a lot of the bands, that you brought on to the show or selected the songs for the show, there's a lot of indie bands, lesser known bands. I mean, was that a conscious choice, or did you just love certain music so you used it? You know what I mean?
I think I loved that music. I really loved that music. It's the music that I still listen to. when I need some comfort, even though it has been a few moments. I think it's the music that Josh liked, the music that Stephanie liked. I think I often got the question over the years, did you use indie music because it was cheaper? And like, really? And, and it was, we never used those bands because it was less expensive. It was really about what fit. And music was really exciting in those years. And a lot of indie labels up and coming, to think about how labels at the time, a little bit previously, people were replacing their cassettes with CDs. The music business was rife with cash. And, in the late 90s and really right before the OC, it was sometimes difficult to get bands to sync, to approve their songs for television. There was a thought that if it wasn't used very artfully, it might be whittling away at their cred. And if there's anything I'm proud of the most, I think it's how we really showed how music could be used so respectfully, and really as fans.
So just to ask that question, if you have a particular scene, and guys, I just want to preface that we will be speaking about different seasons, and there will be spoilers, and we couldn't do the music justice without doing that. There's your warning. But for instance, like, the scene where Marissa shoots Trey, did you, that's hide and seek, right? Yes. Yeah, Imogene. And so did you have to get the approval or show the scene in that respect? Do you have to show or present exactly what this music is going to be used for? Did you have bands that didn't like certain things, or is...
Such a good question, Melinda. Yes, like when you go out to use a song in any film or TV show or advertisement, the music supervisor is laying out exactly what the use will be. And that includes a scene description, a timing within about 10 seconds. Sometimes the band will request footage. Oftentimes on the OC, we didn't have footage yet. The songs had been decided beforehand. So there was a script page, but no footage. And if, for instance, that song got changed to a different scene, or if it got extended 30 seconds, I would go back to re-clear it. So a super specific process, and one that I think is really necessary. If you think about all these musicians are lending sort of their art to our art. And I think it's important that everybody understands how those songs are used.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy that it's like you have to keep going and repitching something to a band or an artist just to get their approval. I mean, that makes me so nervous just thinking about it. I don't know how you do it.
It usually turns out super well. And especially on the OC, bands were really excited and keen to be a part of it. And I certainly felt that shift.
Yeah, it was really impressive, who you had on the show and the songs and the artists and everything. And I still, to this day, I'm just like, holy crap, like I can't believe, we got them, and looking at the list of all the bands that played at the bait shop. And it's just such an amazing accomplishment and something so cool, like this time capsule, that you created and had, and we had it on the show. And it's just, I feel like it hadn't been done, obviously, that kind of thing. And I don't know that it's really been done again in that way, with having a venue and having bands come on and stuff. And I just think that's something so unique to the OC that you did, and Josh and everyone, that is just really cool.
Thank you. I mean, I think, thinking back on it, knowing I was going to come on to, come and speak with you. Of course, like I started really thinking about the OC and thinking about our super musical picture editors, Matt Ramsey, Norman Buckley, Tim Good, and sort of the my partners in the music business, really, that I relied on, like certain labels and certain people who, I was thinking about Hide and Seek and Imogen, and a huge friend of the show, Marisa Baldi, repped Gem and Imogen, and she was, we sort of had a family of musicians that were excited about the opportunity, and that was some of how those very special things eventually got made. The Not a Surf cover, or sort of bands appearing on camera, was, so many music business folks were so enthusiastic about getting these opportunities to the finish line.
Well, speaking of covers, so is that a normal practice? You had Gem do, I'm going to forget all the names.
Did she do Maybe I'm Amazed?
Me too.
Maybe I'm Amazed.
Me too.
Right? No, Gem did Maybe I'm Amazed. The first covered song is Not a Surf, right? If You Leave. And yeah, I'm doing my research. But is that, was that something that you were used to, or had you already established that practice in other shows, or were you doing it a lot more with the OC? And my question is, what's interesting is I think what I'm picking up on, because I'm an 80s girl. I was a total new romantic, new wave. If there's any music that I do love, it's that 80s music. And preparing for this, I realized how much 80s music and covers that you did.
Well,
and I thought that's a lot of Stephanie's taste. And now I'm understanding that's your taste as well. So going back to my question, was that a precedent, asking people to do covers for a modern twist, or was that new?
I mean, I certainly hadn't done it before. I didn't have the opportunity to really do it in this way, to have a project so special that artists were willing to take a gamble and, do a cover. So many of those covers got created with a scene in mind. So almost all those covers were a discussion with Josh and Stephanie and I, looking at script pages or even just outlines way ahead of it, because we'd often shoot to it. If you think about that Not a Surf scene, super Hughesian, right? Like super John Hughesian, like just the way, it takes over for dialogue. The Gem song, I remember, the Maybe I'm Amazed. I remember pitching that. Obviously, it was important to not only look back and make it very current, but look back to the 70s in that case, and to think about what might make sense for that wedding and who should cover it to give it a twist. And I remember having to go to Paul McCartney's publisher because we tweaked the lyric, just from she to he to make it make sense for a female to sing it. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, how will this go? And we got approval. And I remember listening to Gem's cover for the first time and Josh and Stephanie's reaction to it. So it was really fun to do those covers. I really enjoyed it.
I just got the chills. The seasons may be changing, but your self-care routine shouldn't have to. Freshly shaved, baby smooth skin feels great in any weather, especially slipping into pajamas or cozy sweats.
Yes, I love that feeling. And now shaving is actually enjoyable, thanks to Billy.
Sometimes my skin can get dry in the winter, which is why I love using this razor. It's super moisturizing and helps detoxify my skin with a built-in 360-degree charcoal shave soap.
Billy's starter kit comes with their award-winning razor, 2 precisioned 5-blade refill cartridges, and a cult favorite magnetic holder.
Not only is this truly the best razor for women, but it's half the price you'd expect. No pink tax, no visit to the drugstore, no irritation, no matter what.
I am a true fan of this razor and the shaving cream. It's my only hair removal system, and I'm a shaver for life, and Billy makes me a happy one.
Yeah, I mean, I used to just be an avid waxer, and I don't have to do that anymore. And let me tell you, my whole body thanks Billy, because it is just such an easy way to get a smooth, beautiful result.
Don't suffer another second paying a pink tax for a bad shave. Go to mybilly.com/OC to get the best razor you will ever own while supporting this show.
Billy is half the price of other razors plus free shipping. Always. Just go to mybilly.com/OC.
Spelled mybillie.com/OC. That's mybilly.com/OC.
So I have a habit of subscribing to things unknowingly. I did that recently with my daughter's school. But thankfully, I won't have this problem anymore thanks to Truebill.
Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill.
Because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap.
Your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. Recently, I forgot about not one, but like 3 streaming services that I wasn't even watching. They started as free trials, and then all of a sudden they went to monthly payments. And I don't like when that happens. And with Truebill, that won't happen ever again.
Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/OC.
Go right now, truebill.com/OC. It could save you hundreds a year. Truebill.com/OC. Do you have are there any bands that declined or getting covers? Is it easy to just cover any song, or is, like you said, there's a process or what bands declined to be on the show?
I mean, I think Josh has brought up.
Of course, Josh would remember who said no, for sure.
I know who it is. I know it's Arcade Fire.
Passed. Politely passed.
Yeah, I think he. That's one, but I don't know if there's any bands that just said no, we don't want to be on the show.
There weren't a lot of bands, honestly. Like we were so lucky in the cover process, though, because in order to do a successful cover, in my opinion, you need to have an iconic song. If you don't already know it, it's tough to make a cover resonate. The Ryan Adams cover, for example, already existed. We did not create that cover for the OC. That was just a beautiful cover. But the songwriter, the original songwriters, like in Maybe I'm Amazed case, Paul McCartney, you need to get that approval first. And so I would probably say to the publisher, like, here's a song, here's the scene. We haven't created the cover yet, but here's another song by the same band, so you can sort of understand what we're going for. And that is probably how I would have approached it. Later on in my career, I've definitely done a lot of covers over the years, but that was really the first time it was a thing for me. And they lived in the show, and they lived on the soundtracks, and I'm super proud of them.
One of the songs that I realized that had such an impact on me, it was it's the Placebo version of the Kate Bush song, Running Up That Hill. And I remember watching that episode because we read the scripts as actors. We don't know what music is going to, be there. And it is a very manipulative form. It tells the audience how to feel what's going on. And this aftermath of what's happened to everyone with Marissa. I thought it was such a powerful song. And I was like, and I remember thinking, I know this song. Well, because I'm a teenager from the 80s but the Placebo one was way deeper and grittier, and it just
What
fit.
scene was it too?
And
sorry, can you...
It's the opening of season 4, and Ryan is beat up,
Street Fighter
and
mode.
He's been cage fighting, and you see Julie taking pills, and you see Marissa, you see Summer. Everyone's just it's the first image of first time we see everyone after Marissa's passed, and that was one of the most powerful scenes. And I've also noticed this leads to another question that. Great songs, I think you've repeated in a lot of your other shows in different versions of them. Is that correct?
You mean outside of the OC?
Yeah. Have you used that song or some songs repeatedly? There's certain songs that are just timeless, so you can use them in other shows?
I think there's certain songs that just tell a story. right? That just tell a story. But I was thinking about that placebo use too, because it was really up until that point, a song that dark and a performance that dark was so out of character for the kinds of, we definitely used a lot of dark music, but sort of not exactly in that way. And I felt like it really sort of set up, that, a new season for a little bit. And it can be so forecasting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to touch on what Mindy was saying about how music really can hand you a feeling, so to speak. I mean, the way the music was placed throughout the entire series and used really just, in my opinion, music is the biggest star of the show, of the OC. Listen, I'm just going to put that out there because that's how I feel. But also, not only that, there were songs that actually premiered on the show, which is another really cool thing. So the first time you're hearing them, they were heard on the OC. The fact that a Beastie Boys song was premiered on the show, and also Coldplay, right? Was Fix You. Do I have that right?
You do. You have it right. That was another place I had never driven before, the OC.
How did that happen?
It was interesting to think back on those years. And I'm like a behind the scenes person. I'm a behind the scenes person, and to sort of be in the middle of a lot of marketing calls with people very anxious to get their new tracks onto the OC, to be granting interviews. All of that was not what I anticipated. It was great fun. But I, specifically the Coldplay reference, I remember Josh and Stephanie and I going to Capitol Records, because we were going to hear some new Coldplay songs. And we, walked over to my office is about two blocks away at that point, walking over to the offices and hearing 2 or 3 songs. And they actually were hoping, to audition a different one, that we would debut a different one off the album. And Josh just loved Fix You. We all did. And we were able to, to make a deal to have the opportunity to do that. And that was heady stuff. It was, I didn't not appreciate how cool that was while it was happening.
Yeah.
That montage in season 2, episode 23 of Fix You is Summer wins prom queen and Seth jumps on stage, Marissa and Ryan dance, and then Caleb dies. It literally is my favorite moment and montage of the whole series. I remember in the first season that as we were plugging along, and I just remember the momentum of the show and the ratings, and Josh was taking songs from his iPod. And apparently, and I don't know if this is true or urban legend, but when he ran out of things, you came right about the time where he had nothing left on his iPod, and he needed to.
That is the yarn he spins, but I would guess that there are a lot more songs on that iPod.
I just love that it's an iPod.
Right. As we see that this show is becoming so popular and the momentum is just gaining more and more and more. So by season 2, you're having Beastie Boys debut, Check It Out on the Strip, and you're having Coldplay. You actually get what you're just talking about. You get the chance to have bands are seeing that this is an important show, that they can showcase their art and their work. And I'm really interested to know that I feel like this show was just that was that show in that moment in time. We burned so brightly, and it was not only a show to create pop culture and speak through Seth and all of his coolness, hipster coolness, but the music was speaking to the culture as well. So that's ultimately why we had these very, very successful bands on. Is that a good
I think that's
assessment?
I think that's a great assessment. I think,
okay.
artists were eager to be on the show. They and their managers and labels understood we used it with reverence. And I really believe that was part of, why we got so many amazing artists. And if you think back, like there were so many songs an episode. I mean, sometimes 9 or 10, and I know we're going to get into the bait shop, but we had covers, we had regular source, that was just, songs that existed that we licensed. And we had these on-camera performances. So all 3 ways. And then of course we did 6 soundtracks. And something that I remember the most, and you have to think about the time and place. It was right at the beginning of being able to, search a song and understand what you heard and buy it on iTunes. It was right at the beginning of all that. And I remember working really closely with our partners at Warner Brothers Records to put out all the soundtracks. Laurie Feldman, Brian Bumbury, Pat Sabatini, and we would send over a list in my office at Chop Shop, a list that day of the songs that would be in the episode that night, what the scenes were that, they were synced to. And it was revolutionary at that point that a viewer could see in real time what they were hearing. They would be able to see the list and perhaps purchase it. And now that seems like life. Now that seems, it seems really interesting to me that you couldn't do that, but it was like a big part of this job, was making sure that fans had access in real time to what they were hopefully hearing, music they already loved, and a lot of music discovery, music that they would, hopefully grow to love.
Yeah, the soundtracks were such a big thing, with the OC. And you said there were 6 or 7? There were 6.
There were 6.
Right? And even a Christmas one, right? Am I right? There was like a holiday one.
Yep.
You have it. Oh my gosh, there it is. And CDs. Oh, I miss that. I really do.
Right. It was the Christmas.
The Christmas, of course.
Can everybody see?
Oh my God. Hello. Of course it was.
Was the OC the first soundtracks you did? You've done many, many since, right? For all of your shows.
I have done some soundtracks since, but it was actually my first soundtrack I ever did was for Roswell. So this was my follow-up opportunity, which
was your sophomore album.
Which we did 6 times. And we had this amazing team at Warner Records, as I'd mentioned, and to put out 6 soundtracks over 4 years. And the other thing to think about, of course, is it was, obviously a network show. And so we were, watching week after week, thinking about like the soundtrack, when would the soundtracks come out? When would they be fresh? But, also encompass a season of television. Obviously in the new era, so much of series work it comes out on day and date. And so a whole season of something will come out, at one time. And so it is a little different, now to think about a soundtrack than it was then, which is really like capturing somebody's, memories of the last season. And I remember sitting with Josh and Stephanie, sitting virtually, sitting in our offices, and sort of going back and forth on song choices, on sequencing, and how that would come together. And so it was really fun to work on those.
Fall is full of fun. This year, fall's my favorite season, and it's my daughter's birthday season, so we do lots of fun things. Pumpkin patch, going to try to make our way to Disneyland as one of our plans. Hopefully it happens soon.
But to get the most out of your fall, try Huzzah. It's the refreshing seltzer with benefits, made with probiotics for gut health. Living your best life has never tasted so good.
Huzzah tastes so good, and it's good for you. Huzzah adds probiotics to their seltzer to help support a healthy gut. as feeling good on the inside helps you live vibrantly on the outside.
Huzzah comes in 3 great flavors: raspberry, lemonade, strawberry, and hibiscus, and juicy pear. They're all low on sugar and calories. My favorite has been strawberry and hibiscus. And actually, I have become a bubbly water aholic, if that's a thing. I have a soda stream, but sometimes just the plain water is not enough. I love to just add a little bit of the Huzzah so I get a nice little flavor.
Yeah, my daughter loves anything, she says bubbly drinks, but I love being able to give her Huzzah because it has the probiotics, it doesn't have that much sugar, so this is definitely our bubbly drink of choice.
Get ready to fill your fridge by stocking up on Huzzah Probiotic Seltzer by using code OC for 20% off your order at drinkhuzzah.com.
That's code OC for 20% off at drinkhuzzah.com. HUZZAH.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the health and wellness company that makes comprehensive daily nutrition beyond simple.
Life can get stressful, and that stress can impact our health and nutrition. When I'm super busy or lacking sleep, I can't always focus on eating the right foods for optimal nutrition.
Luckily, we have AG1 by Athletic Greens to help with that. One tasty scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multi-mineral, probiotic, greens superfood blend, and more in one convenient daily serving. And I love starting my day with Athletic Greens, and my husband loves it in his protein shake. But yesterday, I actually suggested that he have a little afternoon refresher after a workout and to mix it with just water. But he was totally like, what's that going to taste like? He loved it. He said, this is actually quite tasty.
Oh, that's so nice. See, for me, I'm admittedly really bad at keeping good things in my body consistently. And I just love how easy Athletic Greens makes it for me because it tastes good. It's one thing, and I actually get all the things that I need for that day. I don't have to think about it, which is why it's my favorite.
The special blend of high-quality, bioavailable ingredients in a scoop of AG1 work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, support energy and focus, aid with gut health and digestion, and support a healthy immune system, effectively replacing multiple products or pills with one healthy, delicious drink.
It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, or you just love to eat. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while keeping it tasting good.
To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you an immune-supporting free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase if you visit athleticgreens.com/TheOC today.
So many people are vitamin D deficient, so this is a great way to support vitamin D production during the colder months when there is less sun exposure.
Again, simply visit athleticgreens.com/TheOC to take control of your health and give AG1 a try. I was going to tell you, I had dinner with Norman on Monday, and Norman Buckley, and I told him that we were speaking to you, and he, first of all, he loves you, but he told me some things that were interesting that very, very complimentary, obviously, but that how you defined that you actually created the definition of your job title is you just made it so interesting for them. He said that he and Matt, so that you would create a list, and I guess every week you'd give certain songs. Now, were those songs already okayed, or were they just songs that you liked?
So and it wasn't just me. It was like I had some great people at Chop Shop, Andrea Von Forrester, Andy Gowan. We would send a comp back in the days that you would send a CD. You wouldn't send a virtual playlist. We'd send a comp once a week to the producers and to editorial of songs that we liked that were not necessarily pre-cleared, but felt like they would fit into the world of the show. And sometimes we did super focused pitches, like episode 2, scene 14, there's a kiss, there's a death, there's a whatever it is, and really dig into obviously dig into matching picture. But to me, in order to set the table, you have to have that musical conversation first. And we could sort of, talk to Norman, like, we need more of that band, more Dandy Warhols or more Spoon or sort of, whatever it was. But it was a constant conversation, and really, really a fun one.
He said that he and Matt Ramsey literally would fight over songs. He said, no, we'd actually get into arguments about who gets what song. And sometimes he'd win and sometimes Matt would win. But he just said that he also said that you were very pivotal in getting not just the songs themselves, but actually getting some instrumental versions of the music to lay between the episodes. I wasn't aware of that. In addition to the score.
First of all, Norman is so musical. Like, I'm sure that came across. He was so pivotal in shaping the sound of the OC. I think he cuts with music, and he just, made so many beautiful choices over the years. And I think I mentioned before I had worked with him on a movie right before the OC, and he was instrumental in introducing me to Josh, because I had just worked with him. But yes, what he is talking about is actually industry standard now, which is to supply a picture editor with the instrumental version of a song, so that you can cut through dialogue, cut around, so that you can tell the story and not get in the way of the dialogue. And so perhaps, like, he would pull out a verse and you would just hear the instrumental bed. That is really, really, really common now. It is almost, music supervisor will almost always ask for the instrumental when they're pitching the original song. In the early 2000s, music wasn't a lot of music was recorded in a room. They weren't thinking about a TV mix, which is what that is, now called the TV mix. They weren't thinking about it. They were thinking about, the entire finished song. So that he employed that a lot.
I've heard so many people say that their version of Maybe I'm Amazed has the dialogue over it. They listen to the Gem version, and then they're just used to hearing the dialogue of Marissa and Ryan dancing and her saying, "I understand why you have to go. I love you." Yeah, didn't think about that one.
Confidence, yep. Cohen.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have brought up a few songs that were obviously huge and pivotal and amazing that were used on the show. But there are so many of these moments that I thought it would be super fun to talk about today, and to kind of talk about your favorites and the bigger moments of the show. And like Mindy said, spoiler alert, if you're just watching along and listening for the first time. But yeah, there's so many to choose from, but I think we all kind of put our heads together and came up with some good ones.
Yes, you were just speaking about Norman, who we had as a guest, and his episode is episode 14, and that end where Ryan is running at midnight, Dice is playing by Finley Quayle and William Orbit.
That's the New Year's Eve. Is that the New Year's Eve moment, right?
That's the New Year's Eve.
It makes the whole scene, everything. My heart.
So it's Finley Quay, William Orbit, and Beth Orton is the beautiful vocal that you hear. I think that went down on my very first OC comp, actually. Like, I think that was one of the very first songs that made it to editorial. That's actually one of my favorite songs in the series. If I were to look back, and I just think it is beautiful. It was actually a difficult clear. And I remember sweating bullets. And I can't remember if we couldn't find a publisher. It wasn't like the story isn't as exciting as my fear of not being able to clear that song, because once I saw it in the scene, I was quite sure we weren't going to beat it. And so I definitely put in some elbow grease on that one.
Well, it worked out. I know it made me cry rewatching it with that song alone. It's so special.
So we had Robert Schwartzman on to talk about being to actually the very first band in not in the bait shop, but that was a pretty iconic moment. I'm shaken.
Rooney.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I mean, so definitely important for the show. A natural fit for the show, I think. Like, if Rooney at that, Rooney was so important in LA, so important across the country in the indie rock space. And, they were a little bit of a hometown band, as far as the OC. That was the first band that I think I had to organize. And we certainly learned a lot about, how long a band takes to shoot. Obviously it's not live. It's not a live performance. When a band comes on camera, they're lip syncing to track. And it's complicated to shoot that to make it feel real. And I felt like we did such a good job on it, on doing that on the OC.
And is that what led to the bait shop, or was the bait shop already planned?
The bait shop sprung fully formed from Josh's brain, I think. I wish I could remember every single thing, but I think he called to talk about it, that this was going to be something that was in season 2. And I remember going to Coachella one year and listening to the Killers demo, which must have been that Coachella summer right before the Killers were at the bait shop, which would have been probably October, maybe November of that year was when it was shot. And how interesting it was for me to, because as a supervisor, you don't think about music as far as how it impacts a person live. We're not thinking about that. We are thinking about how does it sound? Is it enhancing story? Is it supporting characters? It is part of the fabric of the score, but it's not often a visual part of the story. For in TV and film, unless we have these special on-camera band occasions. So it was really fun to stretch, to think about, this is going to be on-camera moments. How are these bands going to fit into the story?
You're probably one of the most iconic. How about your Upside Down?
Oh yeah,
Kiss?
what's playing? That's Champagne Supernova, right? Yes. That's a good one. Thank you, Mindy. I know. I was gonna go for the. You know what I was gonna go for, but yes. Let's talk about that. How did that come about?
Matt Pond, PA, one of the most awesome performers ever. Like these covers, we came up with the song first. I can't remember in this case if we were able to talk about script pages. I have a feeling probably Josh told me about the moment. I'm sure that he came up with that song. I think that was a song that he thought would be great for that moment. And I probably felt like Matt Pond was the right person to do it. And he turned in a beautiful cover, a really beautiful cover. And it was exciting, to call the artist. We'd often get on a tone call with the bands and say this is what's happening in the scene. It should be sad. It should be right. It should be iconic. It should be emotional. Whatever. Iconic's not. Iconic's not a directive. Never mind. It should be. Hopefully, it becomes iconic. But to sort of talk that through with the artist, and then get the song back.
Okay, so you have the idea of the song. Is there a short list of bands, or do you have just the one who you want to cover that song?
I think I probably always had a short list in my head, knowing that we had this cover thing we were doing. But I think that in this case, we knew it was Matt, and I probably just had the conversation with Josh, with Stephanie, and then went back to Matt's reps and pitched the opportunity. then off we go.
And most bands were open to that. When you approach them and say, we would like you to do a cover of this song, they're usually just open to that idea because it's an original take and they understand why that song is needed in that particular scene and the modernity. Can you say that quickly? Modernity, sorry, of that moment or that opportunity to do something new.
I mean, it's a really good question because, of course, like amazing artists are very sure of their sound and what they would feel good doing, what would make sense. And I think we thought about that too, just vocal ranges and sort of, Matt Pond's music is so beautifully melodic, like his, it was, sometimes it's thinking about what they're doing, what kind of music Matt was putting out at the time. And knowing that he could just sing the shit out of it.
And you brought up the Killers, before like going to see them, listening to their demo. Obviously, Mr. Brightside, another awesome song that was featured on the show. Maybe do you remember anything about that? Like why you picked that one? Was it when you were listening to the demo?
I mean, I think like the and it might not have it was probably a demo or maybe it was a pre-release. It was before the album was out. I felt so sure that band was just going to connect. It was just so good. It was all so good. I mean, I'm not sure if we had 5 songs, we had at least a handful of songs, and sort of thinking about what song it should be. And reaching out to the reps and organizing that show. But that band made a big impact on me. And, although I wished I was, the age although I wished I was, a high school kid when I was picking out, songs for the OC, I was in my mid-30s. And I think especially the Killers reminded me of some of the best music that I grew up with. So I sort of was doubly connected to it.
I totally agree. In fact, first of all, I think it was such a great thing that we got the Killers. And we started with the Walkman, and then the Killers were number 2 in the Bait Shop. But that song to me is just, it encapsulates, first of all, the show itself, but also what's going on in the show. It's that super awkward date that Seth and Lindsay are on a date, and Alex and Ryan are on a date, and they're at the concert, and it's just the most awkward date, and the song is going, and it just has the right, it fits in that respect. I thought that was such a great, and I just love the sound. And the weirdest thing is the lead singer. Well, I actually read that they'd written that song in 2001, I believe, and it did. But you're saying it wasn't produced or it wasn't released until 2004 or 5?
I mean, I think the song had not been released. I'm not sure if that's what I mean. I'm not sure if I was listening to a pre-release, like a finished pre-release, but it was not. It was still Sequit. It was still sort of industry. I had access to it because I was supervising.
I remember anytime we had a song performed on the show, like Mr. Brightside or "Shaken," "I'm Shaken" by Rooney, like. I can remember the lyrics and the song. So obviously you hear it about 100 times because they start the scene and the song starts over. And I can just hear the Killers now in my head, the Mr. Brightside, so clearly. And I don't even, am I in that scene? I had to have been. If it's that, I don't know. I am?
Yes.
Thank you. I knew I was there. I'm like, why is it?
With Marissa. And it becomes more awkward because the ex-girlfriends show up.
Of course. And yes, I can picture us. How do you like that? Okay. But, and yeah, how the song starts, it's so ingrained in my brain, just like I'm Shaken by Rooney. It's interesting how that lives with you for the rest of your life. And you know what? Lucky for us that they were those amazing songs and bands because it could have gone the other way, I'm sure.
I have to say that I remember being on set because, like I said, I'm an 80s nerd. That's the music I know. But I remember, Misha and Adam, and people would be excited when the bands were on set. And I was like, who is it? Who's somebody called Modest Mouse? Somebody called The Killers, The Thrills. And I was like, I better check these. I had no idea, but I do remember The Killers very, very distinctly. And I was looking towards, Misha had wonderful taste in music and loved, like, she and Adam had like very similar taste. So if I wanted new music, I would listen to what.
Yeah. I mean, Adam, obviously he introduced me to Deathcab, clearly, and Bright Eyes was also Brody. Did we have, like that whole thing? I mean, Deathcab was a huge part of the OC. It was another character, basically, because he loved Deathcab so much and so many scenes with that and stuff. Did Brody actually bring Deathcab to you guys in the show, or was it like a mutual thing? Or
I think he must have, because I started on the 7th episode or the 8th episode of the first season, and Deathcab was already, firmly beloved.
I think Josh overheard Adam talking about Deathcab to Misha. That's how he overheard the conversation, and it became that conversation in the car on the way to LA or something, where he says, don't make fun of
talking shit or something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't make fun of Deathcab. But there's a couple more moments, because we do have another guest that's coming on soon, but there's a couple more moments that we do need to talk about that were just so iconic and so important. And we do talk about the hide and seek. We did talk about that, what you say, and how important that was. So I heard, or I read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd have this song, but you didn't quite know where it was going to go. Is that true?
That is true.
Okay.
We were given the entire album early. So we had Imogen's album. I think we had used a song from her former band, Frou Frou, actually on the OC. And, it was so, that album was just, it's just gorgeous. And in retrospect, we all know it, but it was just beautiful and interesting. And Josh wanted to hold on to hide and seek because he knew that there was going to be a place for it that was impactful.
I mean, yeah, talk about iconic, that song.
And then to have it be parodied on Saturday, that was right.
On SNL. Dear Sister, I think, is the skit. Yeah, it just took off.
Yeah.
I mean, that song is, when I first heard it, I mean, it was just that impactful. The first time you hear that song, you're like, holy shit, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I recently supervised a movie for Amy Poehler called Moxie, and we had a nice laugh over
Dear Sister
about the skit. Yeah. But yes, I mean, obviously Imogen was so important to the show, and, covered Hallelujah for us. And, her voice singing that song. And obviously we had used it once before in the show, but just a beautiful, haunting version.
Yeah, that's the other moment that we were going to bring up, obviously, with Hallelujah.
Yes. You spoke about silence, which I find very powerful. And because I went back and looked at this scene, which, by the way, Rachel, crocodile tears. It was just insane. I don't even know how we're going to get through that, but that's okay. This is real. So, but it opens on just complete silence after the van. This is another spoiler, guys, but the van and Marissa and Ryan have been in this car accident, and it's just pure silence. And he's trying to check on Marissa. And the way it was edited musically and hauntingly, with the flashback of him carrying her before and now carrying her, the song didn't take over the scene. It was absolutely supportive. And this is when we talk about such a collaborative effort between our director of photography and the actors and the special effects. It's amazing how many people contribute to a moment that is so embedded in our minds. And the song was just the most beautiful choice. And it wasn't, and it only took it wasn't that many bars of the song.
No,
right?
it's a short use, as we call it in music supervision land. It was a short use, but it was a beautifully impactful one. And that version didn't exist. We went to Imogen and asked her to do that cover. And, of course it was perfect, when she delivered it, and it was perfect on what everybody had in mind. So much like, gosh, I was lucky, right? Like these like amazing artists and like conversations. One thing we didn't talk about, which like I'm super proud of, was the Beckisode. And we were able to debut 5 songs by one of my favorite artists, Beck, and, sort of make sure they made sense in the episode they were in. And it was really fun to do that.
How did that come about?
Actually, Beck is managed by the same manager as Beastie Boys. And we developed a shorthand about the show, and we approached Beck about, is this something that would make sense? Not knowing what episode yet. Like, first you just have to be like, does this ever make sense on the planet Earth? And then you narrow it down.
A Beckisode.
You two premiered a song, I feel like, in the finale of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
It is.
Yes, I got that.
Yeah.
I remember it got to the show has such and however, the schematics or how they figure these things out, that shows that bands that are on the show, their sales increased, the audience increased. I saw that at some point somebody mentioned that it being on the OC, you can compare it to going on the Tonight Show. You're still just presenting your music to an audience of millions of people. And I think that's what the show did.
Yeah. But like, Lordy, it was fun. Like, it was really special. It was really special to be a part of it.
The last band that ever played in the Bait Shop, Cobra Verde, performed as a Foreigner tribute band for Ryan's birthday because Seth didn't like Journey. I totally forgot that
I feel like it's because Ben loved Journey in real life. Isn't that true? Is that true? I feel like that's true. Anyway, sorry.
I feel like that's true too. I do.
It's possible. Guys, there are so many moments that we could be talking about, and I know we might not have gotten to your favorite, but I mean, there's over 647 songs.
So we don't
have time for all of that. We could do a whole other podcast just on that.
we could just go page by page.
Right.
Well, so, we were talking about Deathcab, which was a huge part of our little show. And also Brody just idolized Ben Gibbard, who was obviously the lead singer of Deathcab. We actually have him joining us today on the podcast, which I'm super excited about. I'm a little nervous. I feel like I'm going to be starstruck. But anyway.
I thought about that. I was like, I feel a little nervous today.
I text Brody. I was like, guess who we're talking to? I just wanted to make him a little jealous. But anyway, he is coming up. We would love to welcome our next guest. Melinda, will you please do the honors?
Well, everyone, welcome Ben Gibbard, the lead singer, founder of Deathcab for Cutie. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much. We are having so much fun dissecting, deep diving this show and understanding the impact of it. And well, my first question for you is that more than any other band, Deathcab, it really defined the OC, and Deathcab Seth and the OC were kind of synonymous with each other. And just how do you feel about that?
Oh, I feel more than fine about it. It's very, I think people have to understand that one day somebody called us up and was like, there's this new show on TV and they're going to use one of your songs in a scene. And at the time we were not familiar with the show. And we were like, oh, that's great, because any money from licensing or TV was something that we very much were in need of at the time. So we're like, oh, this is great. And it'll be on a TV show. That's going to be amazing. We'll tune in and watch it. So we knew, we tuned in to watch the episode that a movie script ending was going to be used in. And the way these things normally go are the song is playing in the background while things are happening, and the music is not referenced in any way whatsoever. So when all of a sudden the characters start talking about our band, we all just kind of looked at each other like, what did they just say, like, don't mess with Deathcab or whatever they said in that particular episode? And I was like, I think they did. And we all just kind of had like a, we thought it was a hoot. It was like really kind of funny and like, well, that's like a new thing. This isn't something that happens often. And then as the band was kind of used as almost like a character in the show, it was difficult to process in real time, because this wasn't something that I was aware of ever happening before. And it was a really interesting way to use pop culture, be it, the way the show was using music and also film and making references to other things that were not in the show, to kind of flush out the characters, was something that I thought was pretty interesting and new in the context of certainly what was on network television at the time.
Right. It was that meta humor that Josh was writing, commenting on what the show was about and using Seth's voice as his own to comment on that pop culture, and being that we're in on the joke, we're in on and taking the piss out of ourselves at the same time. And we were just discussing how that came about, how your band came to be so popular, was that Josh overheard a conversation between he and Misha Barton, Adam Brody and Misha Barton, and he was talking about Deathcab. And Josh was famous for listening to our conversations. Like he had a cardio bar for me, but he had a Deathcab because obviously being a music lover, and that was how that. And a little bit
Brody
more about that.
Was obsessed
Rachel.
with you and your band, and he made sure everyone knew it. But I was just so happy to be introduced to Deathcab and Follow You Into the Dark. Gosh, if that's not the exact title, it's just like the lyric that always stands out to me. That song is incredible. And he really brought Deathcab to everybody's attention, and it became such a big part of the show and a big part of my life personally too, because he was my boyfriend at the time. And it was just so awesome, and it was so cool that you were willing to be a part of it and even came on to perform on the show, which was really cool. And you did the bait shop. And do you remember what that was like or how you felt about it?
It was interesting to me that you didn't play in the bait shop until episode 20 of season 2. And I'm wondering why. Were you asked, and did you pause on doing that, or did you do it, or was it something that do you know, Alex, too? That might be a question for both of you.
Yeah, I believe we were asked early. We were asked at some point in season 1, but I think it was a confluence of a couple of factors that pushed it in the second season, which were, one, we were touring like crazy and trying to find the time. And we live in Seattle. We don't live in Los Angeles. So, we were touring our asses off, and the little time we had at home, we just weren't available to come down and kind of, fall into the rigorous schedule of filming a show like that. And then secondly, I guess we also wanted to see how other bands were presented on the show before we volunteered to do it, to be perfectly honest. You never want to be the first person to do anything, right? You always want somebody else to do it first, and then you see how it goes. And then if when they jump off the cliff into the lake, if they don't break their legs, like, then you'll jump off the cliff after them, right? So I think like Modest Mouse and a couple other bands that we knew had been on the show, and they all had nothing but great things to say. And obviously, at that point we built a relationship with Alex, and we didn't think in any way that we would be, treated poorly or that it wouldn't go well by any stretch of the imagination. But I think just given our schedule and also wanting to kind of see how bands were presented on the show first before we kind of put ourselves in that position, were the reasons. But when we were there, everybody on the show was so wonderful and friendly and made us feel really at home. And I mean, obviously I can only imagine when you're doing a show like that and you're trying to shoot so many episodes. And, I know how long the days are and how crazy everything can be. I would imagine in some instances when you have not necessarily day players, but people who are not even experienced actors or used to being on a film set or a TV set up in your grill, that can be more of an annoyance than a break from the norm, right? But everybody was so friendly and made us really kind of feel really at home, and the cast was great. And one thing that I always remember about being there for that show is like randomly Liz Phair was there. And I had grown up like a huge Liz Phair fan, and we've now become at least friendly. But at the time, I had met her before. So, and she was there, and somebody introduced me to her, and she was very friendly. And she's like, "Yeah, I heard you guys are going to be on the show." So I knew she knew somebody who worked on the show or something. So she's like, "Yeah, I decided to come down and just kind of like see what was going on." And I was like, "This is a fucking trip," because this is like this person that I admired for a super long time. So, that was like a cherry on top of the sundae, which was being on the show.
I missed that day. But can I ask you about actually performing? Was that the first time because I don't know if our audience knows this, when bands are playing, you're not playing like a regular concert. You've got the music in your ear and it's silent. So the extras, the crowd, they have to pretend like they're listening because there's dialogue going on. Did you get to actually play with the sound ever? Or I'm not sure I'm that familiar with the process.
I think you're kind of, you're getting the gist of it. I don't think that we played live at all. Alex is shaking her head. No. Yeah. I don't think we did. I think we just, kind of lip synced while there were things happening in the crowd. And we'd obviously at that point shot some music videos, but we've never shot anything with a cast audience of extras or whatever. And certainly never done anything like that involved people just kind of milling about and then pretending like they were into the thing that you were not doing in real time. So it was a pretty surreal experience on that front.
I mean, it's a pretty long, grueling day, right? There was a 5 a.m. pickup and lugging instruments in a van that you're not going to play. It's a long day. Like but to try to make it as authentic and real as possible. And the other thing, like, of course, we didn't have a band in every episode. There was specifically scripted, and that might have been part of the reason that you were so far into season 2. Was I'm sure you were touring, and also like when were we having sort of episodes at the bait shop too?
I would imagine that trying to kind of put together a scene like that where you have, as I said, like a band and a huge cast of extras, and then you're also kind of trying to move plot points along. That's got to be like a lot of moving parts that I'm sure most people working on the show were not interested in doing that often. But we had a great time. It was really fun.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. Once the episode premiered, what was that like? Was there an instant, increase in interest in your band? Like how was the
He's like, absolutely nothing
of being on the OC? It's nothing happened.
Well, it was interesting because now that, the dust has settled from not only that period of our career, but, the show being such a large cultural force at the time. What was interesting from our perspective is when the OC started using our music and referencing our band, we were doing pretty well at that point. We were playing smaller theaters and larger clubs, and it's like we were just about to release Transatlanticism, if I remember. So this is like fall of 2003, and so we felt like we were at that time. We felt we were about as big a band as we were going to be. That there was really not much bigger, before indie rock kind of broke in 2003 and 2004, there was this period where, if you're selling 40, 50,000 records on an indie label, you're basically like the Rolling Stones, in your own mind. And you're like, and that's as big as bands can get that play this type of music. And then there's this massive cultural shift, which of course was spurred on by shows like The OC and also movies like Garden State and other kind of factors. And so we felt that we were already in a pretty good position before the show started kind of, we started working with the show in some capacity. So I have to admit, at the time, I would become a little resentful when people I was talking to would make the assumption that we were now getting popular because of the show, that it was the show, because our music was on the show and because we had been on the show, that was the reason that more people were coming to see us and there were more people writing about us. And while I certainly would never discount that is certainly a factor, there was this large cultural swell of indie rock becoming more of a household. Indie rock bands were becoming household names in a way that they had never been before. And we were swept up in that large part, as I said, because of the OC. But I think things were also just happening in the culture at that point. But where we really noticed it was when we were in Europe, because at that point, as I said, we were doing pretty well for ourselves in the States, and our records were selling okay, and we were, like I said, playing fairly good sized venues for us at the time. But over in Europe, a lot of our records were not available. They were only available on import. So we didn't have a record label on mainland Europe until Transatlanticism came out in 2003. All the other records were, kind of pre-Spotify, you had to actually physically get them or torrent them. They weren't as readily available. So when we started touring in Europe off of Transatlanticism, we got a lot of questions about the OC, and it was really confusing to us at the time. But then we realized, the show beat us over here. It's like people were watching the show in Europe, and they were hearing about this band, and the overwhelming majority of people, it felt at that point, were getting to Deathcab via the OC rather than us having had established ourselves over there. And then the show gave us a boost, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And really, Ben, like there's just the very beginning of your story, right? Like as far as, your subsequent albums and, sort of reach and fandom.
Well, yeah. And one thing I really appreciated about, Alex, certainly you using our music in the show, and, certainly, how the band was woven into the characters' kind of backstories and everything, was that, at that point, we were not being played on the radio outside of college radio. We weren't on MTV. MTV barely played videos even then, but when they weren't playing us. So being on the OC was a way for us to get into the living rooms of people all across the country and in some ways across the world in a way that they would have no other way to access us. Like, people who were into like stuff like, music and shit that we were into probably already knew who we were. But that was a much smaller number of people than were watching this hit show at the time. So, it definitely proved to be a huge boost for us. And, we certainly appreciate it, but there were those moments where we were like, we've been doing this for like 6 years, and like everyone wants to talk about the OC, but the show was gigantic at that point. It makes perfect sense.
We interviewed Adam Brody, and I asked him, like, does everyone always ask you about Seth? So
yeah, right. Yeah.
It does kind of follow us, but we were also television and the music industry. It was the era before the internet truly exploded with social media. And I mean, how much do you think that's changed the industry? Like if I know that social media is just, it's changed everything in that we, as artists, we can have control over what we put out there. How do you guys both reflect on that?
I think we're now of an age, all of us in our mid 40s. So we lived the overwhelming majority of our lives without it. And because our band started in a pre-social media, pre-Spotify, pre-blog era, we had plenty of time to make mistakes and, learn how to be a band, learn how to tour, learn how to talk to the press. We had a much softer landing along the way because we were existing in virtual anonymity until 2003, 2004. And while I'm sure it's nice to go from your practice space to, the main stage of a major festival within 3 months off of a single, certainly if that was offered to me in 1997, I totally would have fucking took it. There's no way that I wouldn't have done that, right? I do think that we're living in such accelerated times. And I think, being an artist involves failing, and it involves learning your craft and learning how to present yourself, how to fail, how to succeed, and I think about where I was as a human being when I was 22, 23 years old when we made our first record. And I guarantee you that I would probably not still be doing this if this band had started in the last 5 years, where, somebody puts out a song that everybody likes and there's just an avalanche of attention thrown onto a person or a band that might not have the wherewithal to be able to really handle it. And so it's a trial by fire. In some ways, one can argue that it separates the wheat from the chaff. If a band or an artist is truly great right out the box, then they're most likely going to succeed. And other acts that maybe have a hard time getting their shit together or are unable to kind of cope with the stresses of how quickly the entertainment music, how quickly the music industry moves now, they might not make it. But I'm just glad that we were able to come up in a time where we were able to make some mistakes and learn how to do our craft and not have the world's eyes on us from day one. I think around 2005 or 2006, it was definitely after Plans had come out. We did a New York Times arts and lecture in conversation when we were in New York, and there was a Q&A at the end. And this I'm going to call him a kid. You'll understand why I call him a kid based on what he said. He was a kid, early 20s probably, and he gets up and he says, I'm one of your oldest fans, and I'm curious what you think about all these. And I go to your shows now and I see all these new fans, and it's clear that they only know you guys because of the OC. What do you think about that? And I think the answer he wanted me to give him was, yeah, man, you're one of the real fans. That's what he wanted to hear. And what I said and what I believed then and I believe now is there's no wrong way to discover music. It's not a contest. It's not a race. You don't get a trophy if you're the first person to discover Arcade Fire or whatever. That's not how it works. And there are assuredly a lot of people who heard our music on the OC and were like, and didn't care about it. Or they heard it and were into it for a brief period of time, and then they kind of like got into something else. But there are also assuredly people who heard our music on your show and they became fans for life. And people still come up to me and say like, yeah, I heard you guys on the OC, and now it's 10 years later and I'm still coming to the shows and I'm really excited about the new record and blah, 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 blah. So I think that it's there, especially in indie rock circles and like cool kid circles, there's this notion that there's a better way to find out about art or music. There's a more pure way to do it. And I just don't believe that for 1 second.
Yeah, I love that. Just any way to discover something really cool and great, and something that you love, doesn't matter where or how, or if it was, all these youngins and watching the OC, as your fan was claiming. It was just super, super special. That I think it was just like a really special time during the OC and all the music happening, because you obviously, it was happening anyways with all these indie bands, and it was just really cool that we all kind of came together at that time. And it just feels like a really special kind of moment, and just super grateful that you were willing to be a part of it with us.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
I read an interview with that the Subways had said. Was a lovely, positive interview. With they said, first of all, it was a spiritual experience, but they said that they could tell when a new generation of people had discovered the OC because they would get a lot of attention, and they just thought it was wonderful that for generations to come, depending on the popularity of the show, that they discover music 18 years later. And they just thought that was such a positive thing. And just to kind of echo what you were saying about it's a wonderful thing to get exposure. However one discovers music is a great thing.
Well, absolutely. And I remember around that time, I did an interview with Chuck Klosterman, and he brought up this point that I thought was really fascinating, which was, years from now, decades from now, this show will be in syndication in some random corner of the world, and there will be a reference to a band that will assuredly be long since broken up, right? And there'll be these characters talking about this band, and there'll be people watching the show that are like, Deathcab for Cutie, what is that? So it'll be interesting to see over the years as these things ebb and flow, right? There's always there seems to be kind of a waves of interest in things from the past, right? They kind of come and go. And it'll be interesting to see as, the OC goes through these, waves of like people being nostalgic for it and then kind of tuning back in with it. And maybe it goes away for a while. And then maybe another 10 or 15 years later, it kind of crests another wave just to see how, I guess at this point, how our streaming numbers will change.
Right.
Based on that.
The irony of the episode where Deathcab plays is that Seth misses the concert.
Right.
Josh had to write that one in, and I missed it.
Right.
So,
which I thought was a really clever way to kind of present our band, to have like the main character of the show miss his favorite band. I thought was really great.
Yes. Right. Well, Ben, we just have to thank you for taking time to come on the podcast and talk to us. And you were willing to be a part of the show, part of the podcast, but just super grateful, and thank you for joining us.
Of course, it's really wonderful to see I'll see all your faces again, and it's something that we will forever be linked in this strange kind of cross-pollination of pop culture. So I'm thrilled you guys had me on, and it's really nice to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Ben, so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. We have some voicemails for Alex. People are chomping at the bit to ask her questions all year. Here we go.
Hi, ladies. My questions are actually for Alex today. First, what was your favorite music moment that the OC had? And second question is, what is a song that you would have liked to have been featured in an episode, but never were able to, or maybe couldn't get the rights to, or anything like that? Just was curious. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for doing this podcast. I look forward to watching it every Tuesday with you guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Am I on? Is that me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we covered my favorite scene, which was the Finley Quay, William Orbit, and Beth Orton Dice track, which of course was used in the New Year's episode. I also really love the Deathcab performance and the Modest Mouse performance, the two performances at the bait shop. If I could go back in time and put a song on the OC that we didn't get the opportunity to, I would have pushed to do a cover of Beyond Belief by Elvis Costello. I'm a big fan of Elvis's work. I love that song, and I think it would have been covered beautifully for the show.
Have you since covered it?
I never have.
Heard it here first.
There you go. Goals.
Hi, you guys. This is Juliana from Brazil. I'm a huge fan of the show, big fan of the podcast. And DOC really shaped my musical taste. I was only a child, but it was because of the show that I started to listen to the music I listen now. So I was wondering if there was any resistance from the network to like put more mainstream music in the show. There's just a lot of indie music. So I was wondering if it was an easy decision to put that, or you guys had to fight for that. Thank you.
That is an excellent question.
Great question. Yeah.
We did not have to fight. Josh set the table with the tone of the music. He really leaned into discovery. He leaned into this indie music, and we went for it. And it never occurred to me to think about it. And it also, it just felt like we should be focusing on music that worked. We also, as we talked about, used some very prominent artists at the time: Coldplay, U2, the Beastie Boys, and Beck. That music seemed perfect, as well as, artists that were up and coming. So it was really about how things fit.
Hi, Alex. It goes without saying that you inspired a generation with the music from the OC. But I wondered, do you have any regrets at all? Are there any songs that you wish you hadn't used in the soundtrack, or any that you would now change? Absolutely loving the podcast. My name's Sarah and I'm from England.
What an interesting question. No, I wouldn't change a thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Good answer. I got goosebumps on that, by the way. I hope we just barely scratched the surface, you guys. Just enough to give you a taste. But, obviously, like I said, we could go on and on and on. And when I say I got goosebumps, just hearing those voicemails, the impact that the music had and your contribution, and just how important it's been and how it defined so many young people, especially that teen angst as you're in your room listening to those soundtracks or watching the show, this is so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
Just so much fun.
The chills.
And so rewarding to talk to you.
They're just bringing back the memories and
chills.
The songs we talked about. Literally, I did get the chills all over my body 5 times at least today, bringing up those moments and those songs. Yeah. And Alex, we so appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Your busy schedule, and it's just so cool to catch up and to talk about such a fun time and amazing music. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I missed this time. I love talking about the OC. I love talking about the music, and it has been, your callers, how kind that it had that much impact that they called about the music. So very moving for me and super fun to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Follow, rate, and review Welcome to the OC Bitches wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like to watch us, check it out on YouTube or on HBO Max.
Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to start with the pilot episode and catch all of our episode recaps.